In the summer of 1944, Allied intelligence held something unprecedented in their hands. A perfect kill plan. Not a battlefield strategy. Not a bombing raid. An assassination. The target, Adolf Hitler himself. The location, his private mountain retreat at Obersalzberg, Bavaria. The method, a single sniper bullet during his daily morning walk. The codename, Operation Foxley. Most people believe Hitler died by his own hand in April 1945, cornered in a Berlin bunker as the Reich crumbled around him. That much is true. What they don't know is this. Britain's Special Operations Executive had developed a viable plan to kill him 10 months earlier, and it came within days of execution. Then, at the last possible moment, they called it off. Not because they couldn't do it, but because they were terrified of what would happen if they succeeded. By mid-1944, the war had turned decisively against Nazi Germany. D-Day had opened the Western Front. The Red Army was advancing relentlessly from the east. The Luftwaffe was shattered. Germany's industrial heartland lay in ruins beneath waves of Allied bombers. But the killing continued. Every week, Hitler remained alive. Thousands more soldiers and civilians died. Britain's Special Operations Executive, Churchill's Sabotage and Assassination Bureau, had been studying Hitler's movements for years. They knew his routines, his security protocols, his psychology. They knew he visited Obersalzberg, his alpine sanctuary near Berchtesgaden, with predictable regularity. They knew he took a 20-minute walk each morning to a nearby tea house, often with minimal security. They knew the terrain, wooded, mountainous, full of concealment. And they had assets, German defectors with intimate knowledge of the compound. Detailed reconnaissance photographs, topographic maps marked with sight lines and escape routes. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Insert a small SOE team, possibly just one sniper, into the mountains above the Berghof. Wait for Hitler's morning walk. One clean shot from elevated cover. Immediate exfiltration before the chaos could organize into pursuit. No close quarters combat. No bombs that might kill bystanders. No elaborate infiltration. Just patient reconnaissance, professional marksmanship, and a single moment of opportunity. By August 1944, Operation Foxley had moved from theoretical study to operational planning. The machinery was in motion. The SOE's planning group worked in complete secrecy, housed in a nondescript office building on Baker Street, London. Major H.B. Court led the detailed operational design. His report, dated November 1944, ran to dozens of pages. Site reconnaissance, weapon specifications, infiltration routes, contingency protocols. They considered multiple approaches. A sniper attack during Hitler's morning walk remained the primary option. Analysis suggested it had the highest probability of success with the lowest risk of Allied casualties. But they developed alternatives. A car bomb along his motorcade route. Poison introduced into the Berghof's water supply. Even a kamikaze attack by a captured Luftwaffe pilot turned double agent. Each method was studied with clinical precision. For the sniper option, they selected specific weapons. A .30-06 Springfield rifle with telescopic sight. Subsonic ammunition to reduce noise. Cold weather camouflage appropriate to alpine terrain in autumn. They identified potential shooters from SOE's pool of experienced operatives, men who had survived years of clandestine operations behind enemy lines. They mapped Hitler's walking route down to the meter. Distance to target, approximately 200 yards. Angle of fire, slightly downward from elevated position. Wind conditions, generally predictable in early morning. Visibility, excellent in clear weather, which Obersalzberg enjoyed frequently. The escape plan called for immediate withdrawal into dense forest, then down into valleys where local Austrian resistance contacts could provide shelter and false documentation for movement toward Switzerland or Allied-held Italy. Probability of mission success, assessed at 70 to 80%. Probability of operative survival, estimated at 40 to 50%. By late 1944, everything was ready. The plan was complete. The approval chain was clear. All that remained was Churchill's final authorization. And then something unexpected happened. The planners began to doubt. The questions came not from squeamishness about assassination. The SOE had authorized countless such operations against enemy officers, but from strategic calculation. What happens after Hitler dies? British intelligence had watched carefully as Wehrmacht officers attempted their own assassination on July 20th, 1944. The Valkyrie plot. Colonel Stauffenberg's bomb had failed to kill Hitler, but it had revealed something crucial. There were competent, rational military leaders in Germany who wanted him dead. Leaders who might negotiate a reasonable surrender. Leaders who might stabilize a post-Nazi Germany without the chaos of complete collapse. The SOE's strategic analysts began wargaming the scenarios. Scenario 1. Hitler dies. Competent military leadership takes control. Generals like Guderian or Model might pursue a rational defensive strategy. They might consolidate German forces. They might negotiate a separate peace with the Western Allies, seeking protection against Soviet advance. They might prolong the war by months or even years with competent military direction, replacing Hitler's increasingly deranged strategic decisions. Scenario 2. Hitler dies, leading to power vacuum and chaos. Göring, Himmler, Bormann fighting for succession, competing chains of command, possible civil war within Germany itself, but also possible fragmentation, accelerating total collapse. Scenario 3. Hitler dies, becoming a martyr. The Nazi leadership portrays him as murdered by Jewish Bolshevik Anglo-American conspiracy. The German population rallies around his memory. Resistance stiffens rather than softening. One analyst put it starkly in a memo. Hitler's strategic incompetence may be our greatest asset. His death might replace a useful madman with dangerous rationality. There was another consideration, darker and rarely voiced in official documents. Hitler alive meant Hitler accountable. Hitler on trial at war's end. Hitler facing justice for the Holocaust, for the war crimes, for the devastation he had unleashed. Dead, he escapes. Dead, he might become legend rather than criminal. In November 1944, Operation Foxley reached Churchill's desk. The plan was complete. The operatives were ready. The window of opportunity remained open. Churchill read the entire file. He consulted with his military chiefs, with his intelligence directors, with strategic analysts who had been studying Hitler's leadership for years. And then he made his decision. Operation Foxley would not proceed. Not because it couldn't work. The plan was sound, perhaps the most viable assassination plot against Hitler ever developed by the Allies. But because success had become more frightening than failure. The memo Churchill returned contained a simple notation: declined to authorize. No elaborate explanation, no dramatic confrontation, just a bureaucratic decision that Hitler would die by history's hand, not Britain's. The SOE operative stood down. The weapons were returned to inventory. The reconnaissance files were classified. Hitler would live another 6 months. Long enough to see his Reich collapse completely. Long enough to face the reality of total defeat. The bullet that could have killed him was never fired. History followed the path we know. Hitler remained in command through the final catastrophic months. His refusal to allow strategic withdrawals cost Germany hundreds of thousands of additional casualties. His insistence on defending Berlin turned the city into an apocalyptic battlefield. But it also meant the Nazi leadership stayed intact, and therefore fully accountable. When the Red Army entered Berlin in April 1945, Hitler took his own life in his bunker, along with Eva Braun. There was no martyrdom, no mystery, no possibility of legend claiming he had been murdered by foreign agents. Instead, the world saw the complete moral and material bankruptcy of Nazism. The Führerprinzip, the cult of the leader, died with the leader himself. Germany surrendered unconditionally within days. There was no negotiated peace, no preservation of German military power as buffer against Soviet expansion, no clean Wehrmacht leaders claiming they could have won if only Hitler hadn't interfered. The slate was wiped clean. In another timeline, a British sniper takes his position in the Bavarian Alps on an autumn morning in 1944. Hitler emerges from the Berghof for his daily walk. One shot, clean, professional. And then, what? We'll never know for certain. History doesn't run controlled experiments. But we can see the cold strategic logic that made Britain's military leadership recoil from their own plan. Sometimes removing evil doesn't remove the conditions that created it. The Allied victory in 1945 wasn't just military. It was moral. Nazism didn't fall to assassination. It fell to its own bankruptcy, exposed completely, defeated totally. Hitler on trial at Nuremberg might have been more satisfying. But Hitler dead in a bunker, abandoned by his generals, watching his 1,000-year Reich burn after 12 years. That ending left no room for myth. Operation Foxley remains one of history's most fascinating footnotes. The assassination that nearly happened, called off not for lack of ability, but from an abundance of strategic wisdom. Sometimes the hardest decision is letting history take its course.